afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. This is Dean Smith from the Community of Human and Organizational Learning, and I'm doing a very slow, deliberate introduction, just making sure we have everybody in from the waiting room. And it looks like we do. So, welcome to today's webinar. Thank you. So, thanks in advance for taking the time to join this interesting storytelling session about AI and Gen AI, and about kind of how it's transforming the way industries work, the way we work, the way we maybe make decisions, all the sorts of things that our esteemed panelists will share stories about. And what we also hope to do is hear stories from all of you as we go through this, because this is to a greater or lesser extent new for all of us in how we're embracing AI, how we're leveraging AI, and how we think about it. So kind of this is how I'm prefacing it. And Rob and panel, you can correct me because I'm often wrong. This is about the good, the bad, the ugly. You know, what have we gone through from stories we can share to help each other. So with that, what I'll do is a quick introduction of our panelists, and then I'll turn it over to Rob Stevens, who's kind of chairing the panel. So first off is Rob Stevens. We also have Rosemary Bernal Gomez from Southern California Edison, David Barron from SoCalGas, Calvin Davies from PricewaterhouseCoopers, and JD Solomon from the world of JD Solomon. So with that, Rob, I'm going to turn it over to you. Actually, I'm almost going to turn it over to you. What I encourage everybody to do is if you have a comment or a question or a story you want to share, we want to hear from you throughout this. So please feel free to raise your hand so I can unmute you and bring you into the conversation, chat into the chat box so we can share your thoughts. And with that, there you go, Rob. No more false starts. It's all yours.
Okay. Thanks, Dean. And I'm getting the messages about people in the waiting room. I'm sure you're going to take care of that, right?
Okay. Absolutely.
All right. Well, hi, everyone, and welcome to this session. As Dean said, we want this to be storytelling and interactive. The premise here is, I'm hearing this a lot from our clients and even some friends, that I just came from a meeting. The CEO suddenly is all enamored with AI because they heard it in a meeting or they heard it at a conference. So we're supposed to do AI. They don't even know what it is, but we're supposed to be doing it. And so what is it and how do we do it? In particular, we will focus more here on what's known as generative AI. We'll identify that distinction here shortly. But that is all the rage. When you hear things like ChatGPT or large language models, generally speaking, we're talking generative AI. So for the agenda for today is we're going to talk a little bit about a survey that we did. As it turns out, Bob Latino, who's on, and JD and I did a live session, a general session at last year's learning conference. And we thought, well, and at that point, you know, things were kind of new. Let's do this as a review and see where things have come. We'll give a little bit of an update in the technologies, but generally where we want to work to here towards the end of the presentation is a panel discussion among all the participants that Dean just introduced. And just so you can put some names to the faces, as you see our pictures, here's who we're all affiliated with. As I mentioned, we did a session about a year ago at the last year's learning conference. It was called the Current State of AI, the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. At that time, GPT, I think it was 3.5, which is OpenAI's, the one you hear about all the time in the news, including today with Scarlett Johansson, yeah. They're the one that's in the news all the time, and they released in about November, and we were here in May. So we had 4 or 5 months of this hype and trends about GPT. And what we did was we surveyed the audience, and what I'd like you all to do, we're not going to survey you all y'all, as Dean would say. But if you have, particularly it's first two, maybe just sharing experiences. If you have a solid understanding of artificial intelligence, put it in the chat, and Dean might be able to summarize it for here, or if you've used AI as part of your everyday business. We're not going to cover these results here, but we will probably do this again as an update in this coming June's conference. So we'd encourage you to go attend that. But we suspect that all these numbers will move. In fact, by a show of hands in that meeting, it was clear that hardly maybe 10 or 20% had even, you know, many people hadn't even heard of it. Some people have heard of it. Hardly anybody was doing it in their companies. So in terms of AI back then, most people were not, what's this, 80%, 89% were not even using it as their everyday business. We feel that it'd probably be, well, I'm not going to predict the number, but it's going to be much higher than that now. However, having said that, though, I think we want to be clear that most of the things, and our company, First Analytics, is in this space where we're dealing with a lot of clients and teaching them what this is all about and helping them do early implementations. But most people, most companies, even their public persona, they might put something out on their webpage. This is how we're using generative AI. When you go to talk to them, they're not really, it's more toe in the water, talking about ideas, but there's hardly any that we've seen real live implementations, with the exception of James Nolan there, who I see on the call. You ought to talk to James and see some really cool things that's really germane to this organization here that is using AI avatars for training and safety purposes in multiple languages in their processing plants. And even some of the cases that this panel is going to talk about here, we'll confess that they're in the ideation stage or the POC stage, simply because of some of the technology issues, the change management issues, the privacy issues, confidentiality, which we'll talk about here shortly. We'll skip, in the interest of time, we'll skip these. This is available on video on the website, but you might want to just wait until we do this again at this event, which is coming up here June, I believe, LaRonda, it's the 10th through the 14th. I might have that wrong, but just a few weeks down the road. There's a QR code if you want to scan it with your phone. That'll take you right to the page, and you can click through and register. Just for definition purposes, what is generative AI? Well, I asked Google Bard, which is, at the time it was Google Bard, now it's called Google Gemini, but well, what does it think it is? And generative AI idea is, it is a subset of artificial intelligence or AI, but it's more concentrated on creating new content versus analyzing existing numeric or structural data. That's traditional AI. But in this case, we're generating new content, and it most often is things like text, images, music, or even now videos. You've seen some of the videos that are now being created. They're trained on large data sets of existing data, and it's usually going out and finding things on the web. And that is part of the issue in some of these things. What data is it training on? And the intellectual property issues come in, and there's lawsuits now that, hey, you trained on my data, or you trained on my piece of art. And if you're an artist, and now it's creating art that's based on something I did. So that is an issue. But basically, they're generating new content in either of those modes. They call them the modality, text, images, music, or video. So what's different now between AI and generative AI? Well, generative AI technologies are distinguished by these characteristics, and this comes from a Goldman Sachs report. They are generalized rather than specialized use cases. And by specialized use cases, a lot of times AIs can be used for machine vision, for example. We do a lot of work in the railroads, and so they have these sensor arrays, and you can look at videos of passing trains and find things like broken springs. And Mark Fleet, I see, is on here from the Burlington Northern. I'm sure he's all involved with that. But there, the machine learning is it's a single purpose here. But in general, generalized AI is general to just about any topic that fits its capabilities. And then they generate novel human-like output that merely describe or existing information. And then they have these approachable interfaces, which we'll talk about here shortly. So I think what we want to do is have David and Rosemary and Calvin and JD and then myself talk just for 3 to 4 minutes on each of the things. We want to give you an idea, a flavor of what other companies are doing, and it may correspond to what you're doing. It may give you some ideas on what you can do. And by no means, two things, no means is this comprehensive, and by no means does this mean that we're running and making money on some of these things. Most of these things, I will freely admit, and probably everybody else would, we're sort of in the pilot or early stages. Okay. Looks like David, you're up first.
Sure. Great to be here. Thanks for having me. My name is David Barron. I'm a director of performance management and org strategy at SoCalGas in sunny Los Angeles, although it's not very sunny today. But we're Rob, I think I think you hit the nail on the head when you distinguished between the umbrella of artificial intelligence and what Gen AI is. And Gen AI, because um, because it is creating human-like output, I think that's where there's a lot of caution and a lot of thought that's going behind how we roll this out at our company. When we talk about machine learning models and predictive modeling, it's on structured data. It's about the numbers. We don't talk in numbers. We can't talk predictive analytics. But the way that generative AI creates content, it can almost sound almost exactly like a human. And I think because of that, that's where we're starting to get into some really interesting areas of caution, right? On how we proceed. There are a few use cases that we have that are going on. I don't want to get into any of these in too much detail, but maybe I'll just take a minute just to talk about each one of them for a few seconds. Right now in the call center, there's a lot of opportunity in the call center for generative AI, as we know, because we've got CSRs, customer service representatives, who answer calls. They're live agents that talk to our customers. And those that think that generative AI can just revolutionize the call center and we can replace all of our CSRs with just voice bots, that might be the trend years from now. But for right now, we're just looking at it from a compliance and a quality assurance perspective. Because I work in a regulated utility, the Public Utilities Commission mandates some rules, and there's policies that the CSRs have to follow. And we want to ensure that the CSRs are following those mandated policies, offering programs that they should be offering our customers and ways to save money, things like that. And in fact, there's some hefty fines, as there really should be, if the CSRs don't comply. And why do we have to check that? Because they're humans, and humans do make mistakes, and we just want to make sure that our CSRs are abiding by all of the mandated policies and rules that the PUC sets out. That's how we're using it right now. We're going through a technical assessment of, do we have the right technology? And then we're at the same time, we're going through a capabilities assessment. What is the art of the possible with what we can do here? The next one is in invoice reconciliation. You could probably imagine at a utility company with pipes and fittings and wires and all of the different materials that we have to order, all of the different contractors and services that we have. When we get an invoice, it's a very manually intensive process in order to reconcile the invoice for what was stated in the contract. And right now we're going through proof of concepts in a couple different areas to perhaps automate a lot of that reconciliation. That should save pretty much thousands and thousands of man hours going through invoice reconciliation. Our regulatory team gets lots of different data requests, and they have to do lots of research. It's actually the same for our legal team here at SoCalGas, and we're enabling and empowering them to do research a lot faster on a corpus of hundreds of thousands of documents that they would have to otherwise search manually. And then I guess on the lighter side, it's not necessarily as much commercial grade, is survey research. So there's a lot of surveys, like even after this webinar, if a survey goes out, what did you like about the webinar? What are things that we can do to improve? We can use generative AI to summarize what are the top 3 things that people really want to see different or improved the next time we do something like this. We administer surveys all over the company for lots of different purposes, just in the spirit of continuously improving the offerings that we have. So with that, I'll stop there, and I'll turn it over to Rosemary.
All right. Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. And as David said, I am reaching out from Southern California. It's a little cloudy today, but I work at Southern California Edison, and I am a data scientist. So, briefly, what is Southern California Edison doing as far as embracing generative AI? First and foremost, one thing that we knew we immediately wanted to address was creating an AI governance team. This governance team, it was extremely important because we want to comply with policy, ethics, our California Public Utilities Commission, as well as FERC, which is our Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. We went ahead and decided that the most important thing to do once the governance team was assembled is create our vision and mission. Briefly, the vision is we want to use AI technology to unlock our human potential to enable a clean future that aligns with Edison International's overall mission, and our mission with Gen AI is we want to be able to provide every employee within the company the knowledge and the tools to handle tedious, repetitive, and cycle time tasks. We want to be able to provide all of our employees the time to focus on more strategic thinking and value-based solutions. So for today, we are using 5 types of Gen AI. One is called Copilot for the web, and it is a Microsoft Edge software, which was formerly known as Bing. And so we use this Copilot for the web more so to provide us answers, insights, summaries, reports. Another one that we use is Edison GPT. And we use that to reference documents, write essays, compose emails, generate any kind of product descriptions. And that is a web URL link that we use. The third would be our M365 Copilot, and that allows us to perform different functions using internal and external, as well as confidential data from SharePoint, OneDrive. And that is a Microsoft 365 opportunity web, as well as Teams, Outlook. And last, we have Adobe Creative Cloud, which allows us to take text to image and generate a full output that can be photos or vector artwork. And that, of course, would be an Adobe app. And so that is what we are doing at Southern California Edison. And I look forward to answering any questions. With that, I will pass it over.
Thanks, Rosemary. My name is Calvin Davies. As Rob said, in full transparency, I recently retired from PwC. I was with the firm, part of our HR transformation practice, leader in that group. I actually co-led the firm's skills-based organization point of view. And so the 6 use cases that you see there, those are use cases that the firm has been working with our clients, but also the firm itself has been experimenting with in Gen AI and AI in general for a little while. So obviously recruitment is where it really all started. That's probably the most advanced areas where you're going to see Gen AI used, but being used in training and development. I love that as Rob mentioned, the use case of being able to take online training and put it into different languages that would have been cost prohibitive before. Phenomenal use case for that. Deployment is another one, same idea in recruitment, where you've got a set of capabilities that you're looking, whether it's in career path or succession model. And in the olden days, we would do that by hand, right? In those big sessions where we're trying to figure out, does somebody really have the skills? Gen AI now can really enable, if you've got the data, enable you to be able to look at your job descriptions and what you're really wanting, even on the behavioral side, against the folks that you have. Again, the more data, the better. And this is really something that's more on the horizon. In performance management, helping to analyze goals, helping to create, verbiage that you would use in a performance evaluation, helping to, to coach managers. Engagement and satisfaction, the use there is really in helping the qualitative data, which I know a lot of us, as we've used engagement and satisfaction surveys, we'll look at the quantitative, but this really enables you to get to a point where you're asking the open-ended questions that before maybe we were afraid to do, because how do you analyze that? And then in HR operations and HRIS. And one just quick example there that PwC did was we created a layer for the firm, a layer between our employees and our various HRIS systems and all the databases, so that our folks could, in an app, query it. They don't know that it's going through about 3 or 4, gathering data from 3 or 4 different places, and can tell them information very easily on an app that otherwise it would, probably take a call to HR to get. So those are some use cases that we're seeing in HR. Obviously, there's all the change management around this, as Rosemary and David have talked about as well. Love to talk about any and all as we get into our panel.
Okay, JD Solomon, and excited to be here. As Rob mentioned, I had the pleasure, Bob Latino's brainchild was this segment of the last year's conference, and Rob and I kind of shouldered it as kind of early adopters, I guess I would say. I started out probably like Rob. I was much more interested in predictive. I've been in Fortune 500 companies for about 20 years, and I jumped in from my neural mesh background and said, I'm going to use this to do some forecast. And really, what do you trust, right? What black box do you trust? And what I found was the qualitative, the labels, those kind of things, still in the generative AI were probably the best places to use the tool, at least a couple of years ago. And so these are the kind of things we do. The top 3 or more from a reliability, engineering background, maintenance management background, infrastructure background. Those are kind of the 3 things we do with it from that perspective, my little company now. And really where we've found the bang for the buck as a small company is in helping us draft documents, review draft documents, edit documents, and then do the visuals. We've been able to create some really cool visuals, like with tools like Midjourney, even actual photographs, and kind of protect the innocent, so to speak, and change some things around. So it's been very helpful from that way. Rob, I'll give it to you.
Okay. Thanks, JD. Thanks, everyone. So First Analytics, we're a little bit different in that we are mostly doing work for our clients in multiple industries. So I get to play with trains, I get to play with the utilities with David and Rosemary, consumer packaged goods, retail, energy, so oil and gas. So we get to see the applications across industries. However, we do use it quite a bit internally. So I broke these out internally versus externally. We call it Google on steroids. Those are where you can create custom or private GPTs to act as AI experts on a topic. So we will take documents and create our own, roll our own, if you will. One thing I might point out too, if you've ever come across the site perplexity.ai, there's a free version and there's a paid version, but think it's a hybrid between Google and GPT-4, although it could use some of the other LLMs as well. So not only will it give you the search results, but it'll give you its interpretation. It sometimes makes mistakes, as you might expect, but anymore, if I'm researching a new topic, I go to perplexity.ai. We use it to write code for data science projects, like what algorithm should we use, and it'll write Python code and call the libraries, and in fact, it'll tell you why it did things. It doesn't always get it right, but it'll get it 40, 50, 60, sometimes 70% of the way there. And so it's a time saver for us. It can create content for blog and papers. We actually, here's a little bit of a confession. We put out a couple of months ago a little 25-page guide to vetting vendor AI claims, because we kind of saw, like, as we operate in this space, we're sort of aghast at some of the, we've been doing this for a long time, and now everybody's coming in doing it and making these overextended claims and kind of ruining it, right? No, you can't do that. And so we put together this guide. You might want to go to our website and find it. I think it's on the library page at firstanalytics.com, probably halfway down the page. But here's the confession: 90% of that was written by a combination of 3 large language models. Now, that's not to say you just let it go and then it's good to go. And in fact, Dean and I were talking about how these days I can pretty much tell when a blog post has been written by ChatGPT, because I know how it talks. I know what words it likes to use. And I'm thinking, couldn't you at least like spend some time to make it sound like you wrote it? and so we didn't just let it go like that. There was a lot of prompt engineering. That's where you basically tell the large language model what you want to do, and a lot of iterations. So we did put quite a bit of time into that, but it did save us hours and hours. So and productivity is where a lot of the large language models come in. With respect to our clients, sometimes it is a productivity, but sometimes it is something in terms of revenue generating. We're talking to I don't think it's on here, but a company that does dependency, addiction recovery centers. And they want a way to be able to say, well, how do I get more patients in here so we can treat them and make them better? And so we're doing that. So that's more revenue generating. Not that they're in it to make money, but they want to improve their business. Customer feedback. Think of a grocery retailer where they provide a survey, and the LLMs can go through and figure out sentiment. Is it positive or negative? And sometimes it's both. And what is the issue? Is it an availability issue? Is it a store cleanliness issue? And then it'll kick off a report to the appropriate departments, whether it's supply chain, whether it's store operations, whether it's whatever the case may be, customer loyalty. And in fact, it can draft a letter and a response. Now, nobody wants to just let that thing go automatic. But again, it's a time-saving thing. Think of these as AI assistants. Employee satisfaction and engagement was mentioned before, and then this is more of an IT thing, but what we're seeing a lot is migrate platform X to platform Y, and that could mean technology X to technology Y. An example might be, I have all these Tableau dashboards. I now want to migrating to Power BI. This is very common for us right now. We've got a project going right now in that. Now, that's not to say the dashboards themselves, because remember, these are large language models, and although they do images, we're not like, take this Tableau report screenshot to make this Power BI, but there's all that infrastructure under the hood, tables, calculations, and what we're able to do is 2 things. First of all, create, take these 7,000 calculations that support these dashboards in Tableau and create the equivalent ones in Power BI, and that way it's an IT time saving. I'm making it sound a little bit easier than it is, because it's never push the button. With all these things, don't believe any vendor that says just load it in here and out comes this magic thing all done for you. That's never going to be the case. But again, it's a productivity issue. And then we'll create various AI experts on internal business processes. We do a little bit in greenhouse gas reduction, supply chain operations. So that's how we see our clients using some of those things. And now that I think we're about on schedule, we're going to transition now to the panel discussion. You've already heard some of these issues like company confidentiality, things like change management. There's the bias issues, there's so-called hallucination. These are some of the things that we want to come out in the panel. Feel free to put something in the chat, and Dean's going to handle the chat, and you may take you off mute and let you ask the questions. But and we'll apologize a little bit in advance, because some of us all do this, and we'll be like, Rosemary, are you going to take that one? Or Calvin, are you going to take that one? Because many of us can speak to all these things, and I'll probably let the panel do most of the speaking here.
All right. Transition to me here, I think, right, to JD.
Right.
And let me do Q&A. Let me remind our panelists, I've got kind of 4 set questions for each of you to answer. And so be brief, right? Maybe one sentence or 2 if you can, we can elaborate. I've got 4 questions that were given to us in advance. And then I've got a few more, plus whatever Dean has. So probably a lot of questions, and we want to make this as interactive as possible. Also remind everybody that I looked at the survey results from the pre-survey from the people that registered. We had 60% of the people on this call are just curious, right? So I wouldn't call those adopters, they're just very curious. 28% said they were in the process of adopting. So 88% are pretty, of the people on this call are probably pretty early in their stages. Only 7% said they were pioneering. And one of those was Rob, so we give him credit for that. And then 3 people said they were just totally afraid of it. So for panelists and for everybody alike, we're still at a very young age of maturity in our AI journey. So the first question I've got, we're on one extreme, it may be everybody's doing it, so we just jumped in and we're kind of morphing our way through. To the other extreme, some corporate visionary came down and said, this is where we're going to get our competitive advantage. So I'll start with Rosemary, go to Calvin and then David. What motivated your company or even you to get involved with AI? Was it haphazardly or was it very visionary and structured?
Yes, fantastic question. Southern California Edison obviously is focused around safety. What we do is extremely dangerous work for our utility linemen because they have to work with energized lines when they're doing maintenance and repairs. And so the reason why we work with energized lines is because if we were to de-energize it to make it completely safe for maintenance and repair, our customers would probably not be happy with an outage. So with that said, our focus is how can we use Gen AI to help complement what our employees are working to help make our environment safer for our utility craft crew. So that was our number one focus. We use generative AI with the purpose of understanding that it can never replace a human because of it does not have emotional intelligence. We know that we need human conversation. We also know that around safety, life happens for our craft crew. Births of children, sleep deprivation, vacations, you know, the passing of family members, all of these emotions take a toll when you're expected to do the most hazardous type of repair. So, with that, the human side of it is that we talk around safety and we know what is going on with our team, especially foremen know very well what their team is. So, with generative AI, it helps complement safety around the work that they're doing. And we, as I mentioned before, we purposefully have our AI governance team, not only for policy and compliance, but we also want to make sure that our focus is not to replace anyone. Our focus is what tools can we provide to, again, uh, embrace a cleaner energy type of environment for the state of California, and also to share what our mission and vision is for all utility companies, not just in the US, but around the world. So I hope that answered your question.
Well, and that was a perfect segue to Calvin, because we've got a couple of questions on the human side and the human resource side, and what can you trust, maybe, Calvin? And what about your PwC journey? How did you guys get into it? Was everybody doing it, or do you have a vision for it? What was it?
So for the firm, I mean, in HR for a long time, right? We've been trying to figure out how to add value and do it cheaper and cheaper, right? So before I was at the firm, I left for about 12 years. I was CHRO of several companies, had the opportunity to lead talent management at Harley-Davidson. So I had some great experiences and then came back to the firm. And so in HR, that's what we do, right? We always have a target on our back. We're always trying to add value and be as strategic as a partner as we can and do it as cheaply as possible. So from a firm perspective, AI in general and Gen AI in particular, I think really enables both the value side and trying to do it more cheaply, more quickly. And so we, at the firm, we saw it for ourselves in the internal HR group, which I'm not a part of, but, kind of consult to a little bit, or used to. I did retire, like I said, 2 months ago, so I'm out of the game now. It's nice.
And
But
Calvin's 28 years old, as you can tell, so it was an early
Yeah.
retirement.
That's right. I mean, there's so much opportunity that we see in HR. Again, across all of those use cases that we talked about. So, I would say, and we can talk about specific details, but all of the big vendors, right? So the big three, HCM vendors, PeopleSoft. Well, I guess it's Oracle now, right? That dates me right there, so I am ready to retire. Workday, SAP SuccessFactors, they are all scrambling to get going. The middle ones, ADP, Ceridian, UKG are the same. The little ones as well, and there's opportunities. I think as we've been talking, especially when like I said before, I was helping to lead the skills-based organization. So there are a lot of those talent intelligence platforms that are smaller companies that are leapfrogging capabilities that some of the bigger ones have, because they're really focusing specifically on AI and on Gen AI. They'll probably get bought. I can say that now that I'm retired. I'm not official PwC, but because that's kind of how these things work. But it's moving so quickly that what is kind of standard today will not be standard in a year. That's for sure. And so there's some exciting opportunities there, but I feel it will significantly transform HR in a way that we probably haven't seen since the Ulrich model 20 years ago, from an org design perspective, and in HR. So
Very good. All right, David, you're last on this question, but was it happenstance that you got into AI, generative AI, because everybody was using it, or did you guys have a really top-down structured approach to?
Yeah, this really is a good question. And I'd say it's a little bit of everything. In fact, I think a little of it is, even our CEO says we have to use AI. Now what, right? Or what do we do now? But it's a little bit of what Calvin had said. It's a little bit of what Rosemary had said also. As I work for a utility as well, safety is, very important to the work that we do. I think the only thing that I can add here is that internally, we create our enterprise goals, and then it kind of trickles down to the organizations, the departments, the teams. So we all have this North Star at the enterprise level of creating goals that fall into 6 different categories. One of them is under safety and operational excellence. And we're starting to take a look at how generative AI and AI can help create capacity, create efficiencies, keep people safer. There's just so many use cases under safety and operational excellence in the way that we do work, making us more productive in the work that we do. Another one is in technology and innovation, and that one's pretty obvious with generative AI. Another one is in clean energy. There's a lot of content generation that we can utilize in developing our strategies and helping us brainstorm different ways to think about things in clean energy. Financial discipline is another one. And then also, a lot of what Calvin just spoke about in people and culture. So there's those 5 or 6 pillars that we generally use as our North Star in the way that we operate to do better. And I, some of it I think was top down, some of it was bottom up as well. But from all the other utilities that I speak to, it seems like most of us are close to being in the same boat, kind of trying to solve this together.
So, as you mentioned, we've got Calvin from HR, and we got 2 regulated utilities on the call. So, topic Rob and I have talked about, especially as kind of early entrants, early participants in this process. But how do you know what to trust? That's what I struggle with. Which of these softwares are coming so fast? It goes everything from who's using what data to even cybersecurity is too much of a broad umbrella, but people can penetrate some of these things too and give you the wrong answer. So, Calvin, how did you come up with what products to trust as a kind of from an HR perspective?
Yeah, it's a great question. So obviously, dumping your data or in PwC's client data into ChatGPT is a bad idea. And so, but we wanted to be able to use some of that capability. So very quickly, PwC created its own internal ChatGPT version, right? What do they call it? Chat PwC is what it's called, which is, protected with all of the firm, firewalls, which are pretty extensive. And so for us, that's something that we did. I know other companies are doing something similar. The other thing that I would say is the big vendors, again, specifically HR, the big vendors know that, we're talking Workday and SAP and Oracle, right? And the others. They know that they cannot, if they introduce, some kind of a data breach, because they're all starting to integrate, Gen AI into their tools. If they introduce some kind of data breach, they're in big trouble, right, from a reputational perspective. So I think they're being very careful. So for me, I have more trust because of the downside risk reputationally that those vendors have, to going with something like that, because they're testing and retesting. Or again, building your own if you have the capability and the data scientists in-house. Yeah.
Okay, David, how about you from your perspective? What about the security part of it and the who do you trust kind of question?
Yeah. So we're using AWS as our primary cloud. We've got information that's on-prem, and Amazon has their own large language model. It's called Bedrock, and that one is, we've got a massive cybersecurity team that I just have to trust is doing the right thing with our information and our data. And, I think early on, I mentioned that we're doing an assessment at the call center. We're taking verbatims, converting that to text, having Bedrock kind of read through, summarize what's going on there. Of course, for the purposes of compliance and quality assurance, just for that purpose. But we too also, I guess you could call it on-prem. We have a private instance of ChatGPT as well, working with Microsoft. So this is one where I have to trust our cybersecurity team is doing the right thing.
So. Rosemary, I think you've got your own internal. Now, Rob and I can talk because we're small enough companies. We don't have this option, you big guys. That's a real challenge for us small guys. But Rosemary, tell us about your own platform too. So.
Yes. So, as far as trust, what we've done is we've built through predictive analytics, we have taken a lot of our data, specifically work orders, and we have made sure that in those 5 years of historical work orders that we used Python coding very early on. We started this project, and I'll transition quickly into probably change management as well as trust. With that said, we knew that we needed to find a way to read the data and to tell a story. Why are we averaging 2 to 3 fatalities a year? What can we do? What does this story around these scenarios of these fatalities, how can we use this information and build trust within our culture, and also make sure that whatever we're building in predictive analytics, that it is accurate. And so we went into Python coding. We took 5 years of historical work orders, and we wanted to provide information to our utility linemen about the risks surrounding the work that they're about to do. So that really was, how do we build that trust? my approach to that was to take the very first version of our predictive model, which we knew was terrible, but the intent was, let's go and do a road show with all our utility linemen from different regions, mountainous, desert, city. They all have different challenges. And let's ask them, what would you want as a checklist to help complement your expertise, to help complement and mitigate those risks around the dangerous work you're about to do? And fast forward, with all of that information in our road shows, which we took a year to really understand, we started building a predictive model that um, flagged a work order that had similar attributes as to one that was associated to a fatality. It stamped the work order. It provided information to our utility line crew. It did not tell them how to do the work. It did not tell them what they needed to do. It provided them sound safety information so they can work around those hazards and make mitigations. And that helped build trust. And also, we as data scientists, my partner and I, made sure that whatever was output at least had an 80% area under the curve. In layman's terms, 80% of the time it was pretty accurate. As this took about probably a little over a year to build trust with our culture, and they had skin in the game because they were very much involved in building that model. And we wanted to make it easy. We didn't want to make them have to push a button, generate a report. It was already information that we leveraged with what is given to them before they commence the work. So that's how we built a safety culture and also made sure that it was sustainable and adoptable.
It's
very good. Very
JD,
good.
Can I just
Yeah,
shout out
Rob.
Rosemary? If you want to read more about it, Google Tom Davenport, Southern California Edison. I'm hoping that will do it. I'm displaying here, so I won't do it here, but our chairman, Tom Davenport, profiled the good work that Rosemary did on the change management. So that's a very interesting read.
And I'm gonna let my fourth question was change management, so I'm gonna let that stand for that and move to my third, and then I'll do a little lightning round. Rob, I got a couple for you here, but next topic will be on ethics, right? And I go back before Calvin or even before Rob here. I'm in Wikipedia mode, right? I mean, it was dirty to use Wikipedia because people just threw stuff on Wikipedia and you didn't know what was on there. And heaven forbid, now we actually reference it sometimes, right? In our papers and our documents. So my question here on ethics, my big challenge here a couple of years ago was, what's plagiarism, right? That was my ethical challenge. And how do I cite this stuff? Where does it come from? And who's behind it? And whose stuff am I, quote unquote, stealing? So let's start with David. I'll go David, Rosemary, and Calvin on this one. How are you guys dealing with the ethics quickly? Because we're running out of time, but how you deal with the ethics? And are you citing when you're using these systems in your documents and papers? So David?
This is a topic of conversation that I think can go on for a long time. In fact, I saw Tanya, it looked like, had posted a question about the Great Discovery training platform using video, and you can have different character actors take voice and actually have movement to your lips. And I saw a deep fake, I think yesterday, of Ryan Gosling teaching how LLMs work. It's all over YouTube. You can try to find that. It's actually pretty great. I mean, he actually makes it pretty interesting because it's Ryan Gosling teaching us about LLMs. Ethics is a tough one. In fact, I secretly take a look at AI detection software that's actually free online. And whenever somebody delivers a safety message, whenever somebody delivers a message in general, I tend to use that quite a bit to understand how much of the content was AI generated and how much of it wasn't, right? But then there's also other software like humanize.ai, where you can actually generate content from AI, put it through humanize.ai, and then it sounds like a human. It's like, where does it stop? This is a really interesting topic that I I don't know that we have solved. I think it's, as AI becomes closer and closer to, we'll call it thinking or behaving more human-like, and because humans are fallible, as said in the chat, and humans are always looking for loopholes, and humans at times can be nefarious. I think it's only going to be more and more a really interesting topic of conversation.
I'm gonna cut you off there because the length you could talk all day, but the length of your answer tells me it's a really tough one. So
thank
Rosemary,
you.
maybe a sentence. Are y'all having the same struggles on your end?
Thank you.
We go back to that AI governance team because, company confidentiality, intellectual property. So what we've tried to do, is ethically making sure that whatever AI software and intent is quickly guarded and safeguarded to ensure that it is within our mission and vision, and also that our employees know the intent of what they're doing as far as using Gen AI, and not necessarily plagiarizing or whatever it may be. So we we are trying to grasp that ethical morality, and making sure that we have a paragraph as far as what the company is committed to being fair and transparent. So that is something that we are building, and I'm sure it will continue to evolve.
Okay, Calvin, quick answer.
Yeah. So just a couple quick thoughts. Number one is if it's inquiry, right? So it's a bot coming back, inquiry to an employee question, I don't have a problem with it. But if it's like being used, in comms or something like that, for me, and this would be, as a CHRO, this would be what I would tell my team: use it as an input, right, as a first draft, and then it's your responsibility, right, to take it and make it yours. Right. So for me, that's how I would use it, and that's how I have used it, actually.
Okay, very good. All right, great questions, panel. Great answers. Very insightful, everybody. Let me run through these real quick, and I've got two for Rob, and because these came from the audience in the pre-session, Rob. But how fast can we move into AI, and that includes how fast can we trust people on the very low end of their maturity curve? How fast can they move into it, and how can they trust it? How long does it take?
You can't move as fast as the technology is moving. So we have an internal working group that are working on these things, and the phrase that we have is, "Oh, that's so 4 weeks ago. Now you can use this technology." Generally, maybe I'll just sort of be generic here and say you can't move fast enough. You can always move fast. You always should be moving faster. On the other hand, there's technology aficionados that are rushing headlong into things without consideration of the ethics and whether it's good and stuff. They're just enamored with what this can do. And we all have these people in our organizations. Oh, I threw this into GPT-4. Early on, there were issues with T-Mobile and Samsung about, wait a minute, what are you doing? That's a company document you're uploading there. So you do need to proceed with caution. But we also like to, with our clients, say, well, what is the value delivered? Just, it's not a technology oriented thing. It's what can we deliver with this? And then it's a secondary question, will this technology help? And then, how will it help? And I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, JD, but.
Oh, good answer. Let me go another audience question up front. How do we control expectations on data, Rob? Or the availability of it, because it takes data to feed these machines. Yeah. And I know you've been involved a long time, but how do we control those expectations, good or bad, on data?
Well, in this case, data is mostly textual data, and that's kind of the revolution here. There's a large language models for a reason, because they're generally processing data, language or text. They're not still that good. There are some exceptions, but they're not that good at math. So, think of it that way. What documents do I have available? SharePoint, Rosemary mentioned SharePoint, PDFs. How are those documents? What could be the raw materials? Think of it as you're training an AI assistant. We have somebody that we work with on greenhouse gas reduction for railroads, and we trained an AI Wayne. His name is Wayne. And, then we can ask Wayne, out of all the materials that he's produced, what AI Wayne thinks. but there are some certain technical issues where you can't just like give it a PDF. There are technical limitations as to how much it can take in a chunk. And this is where we get into the technology. There's some technology. I'm going to throw out some words that you can Google: LangChain, retrieval augmented generation. So you do need to become familiar with its limitations, because again, everyone's going to claim that train the AI and an hour later you have this expert. It's not that easy. Doesn't say it's not doable, but it's not that easy. So it is a data question, but it's also how do you process that data?
And then one more question, and I'm going to deflect this one off the panel to Bob Latino, because he's kind of the founder of getting us all going here. But we had a question about more or less about reliability type engineering, mean times between repair, mean times between failure, all those kind of things. And can we use it for that? And I would say yes, but I'm going to give it to Bob because I know he uses this for reliability and root cause. So Bob?
Well, I think a lot of if the question is directed, am I using it? I'm not, because obviously I'm not at a manufacturing plant. But I think that all of these answers from all of these experts are make you both excited and scared at the same time to try to apply it, because of the lack of trust as on the results that you get from that. I don't see why there, mean time to restore, mean time to repair, mean time between failure. All of that data exists. It's just matter is, how confident are you in the source of the data versus its ability to be churned out by these new technologies. I mean, that we Jay, the game, JD. We don't trust the data before, so I don't know that we're going to trust it anymore now that somebody else is generating it.
Yeah. And I think that's right. But it's not a bad starting place, is it, Bob? I mean, I've queried things like how do certain things fails or failure modes for certain type of pump, and it gives me a pretty good list if I prompt it right, as a starting point.
Well, but it's also, as I understand it, it's got to be based on what people are putting in the first place. You got to record it first, right? And it has to be accurate in order to be able to slice and dice it in a much easier fashion. So, we're not typically great at recording that information. So this is not a miracle worker that it's going to fill the blanks out for you.
All right, very good. Panel, Dean, that's the last question I had. And I will just say there was one other thing about the value of a community. And I think this kind of community and these kind of discussions are great as people do their maturity curve AI to bring us all together in this format, in this CHOL type environment. So Dean, I give it to you to close us out.
Yeah, thank you very much. And it was an interesting discussion and a lot of good storytelling and sharing, to help people, embrace, come up the learning curve, however you want to articulate that. There were a couple questions that I do want to touch on quickly in the chat box or build on those slightly. And I know we're out of runway, so this is going to be a lightning round. Sorry. And the first one, Rosemary, I'm going to start with you, if it's okay, because it alludes to change management and how you help an organization make a shift. The question that Laurent asked was, have you noticed Gen AI replacing software or people? I'd like to think about that slightly differently, either the real or the perceived. I'm going to lose my job if I embrace this kind of world. How big a deal is that for organizations to pay attention to?
Oh, it's the number one biggest fear, I would say. It's like, we're the boogeyman. And so with that, I feel that I was very fortunate. I have almost 30 years at Southern California Edison. So I had trust with our craft crew. So if you can find someone of influence that the craft trusts, then I would really focus on making sure to have them on your team as you start to build conversations around how can we embrace innovation in a way that aligns with our mission in keeping all of our employees safe, as well as embracing a clean future. So my number one is build a strong team with a bunch of influencers who understand what the intent is, and that it is not to replace jobs but to help complement what they're doing and creating safety measures.
Thank you. And the other one, and a couple of people touched on this by giving thumbs up in the chat box, and it's a question that, David, I'm going to start with you because I think you might be close to it from the CSR world, but obviously all y'all just jump in if you need to. But the question Chris asked was, can someone comment on the development of standard operating procedures and how easy or difficult is it to properly train a system to start developing an SOP or something that looks like an SOP?
Yeah, that is a good question. We're grappling with that right now. We're working in not necessarily standard operating procedures, but in developing. We're using LLMs to help us develop policies. So I think probably the next step after that would be standard operating procedures, and that's probably about as much as I can say there. But yeah, that's a really good question.
Yeah, go ahead, JD.
And I'm using it quite a bit now, a lot in the past year. But the question is, it's kind of like Bob said, we do a bad job of SOPs to begin with because the experts want about 6 or 8 steps, and then the rookies need 30. So it kind of goes back to what Rob says to me is you've really got to be good at writing prompts. What do you want? What level of SOP are you looking for? Because we have a hard enough time doing it manually sometimes, and you really got to be good at the prompts. So it's something.
Awesome. One more question that just coming from me, because I'm curious about it. If I, and I'm not an expert in any of this or even close, but I think about decision making and how organizations, how people make decisions, and framing the question the right way is often the most difficult part. Is framing the question the right way or picking the right target variable? How important is that in the world of Gen AI? And that's for any of you.
It's really important because there's unintended consequences. If you don't thoroughly think about what's my intent, what's the end goal, and what could the unintended consequences be. So when working with the C-suite, I think it's extremely important not just to share what the vision in adopting, innovative tools, but also being mindful as to what's the trickle down effect and how could this go south. So very, very important to be very transparent and be honest as far as, are we ready for this?
That's awesome. Thank you. I love that. And I often quote U2, but their song lyric about, we thought we had all the answers, it was just the questions we had wrong, totally comes to mind there. So thank you for that. And with that, we're 4 minutes over budget. So panelists, thank you very, very much for your time, for sharing with this community, and the great questions that we got from everybody on the line today. It was a really good discussion on a very interesting topic. And a reminder that the conference is coming up on the 10th to the 14th.